You're listening to the Ballet Piano Podcast, lifting the lid on dance accompaniment.
Hello listeners and welcome back to this episode of the Ballet Piano Podcast. My name is Chris Hobson and this week sitting around the table with us we have Mr. Matt Gregory.
Hello listeners.
And Mr. David Yao.
Hello everybody.
Akiko sends her apologies but pregnancy has taken its toll this week, so she's a little bit indisposed and not really feeling up to it. So coming sitting around a table and talking about Mr. David Yao's favourite subject of tempo rubato was not in Akiko's schedule today. She couldn't make it, so she does apologise, but keep checking in for the socials and we'll see how things are going. So, tempo rubato in ballet class. We all know that the tempo is one of the things that you don't really mess about with, but then you can add it in. So if you do a quick Google search for tempo rubato, it comes up with tempo rubato is a musical term referring to expressive and rhythmic freedom by a slight speeding up and slowing down of the tempo of a piece of music according to the direction of the soloist or a conductor. So that is the definition of tempo rubato. David, hello, gorgeous person. How much do you like me doing tempo rubato in your class?
Well, it depends, doesn't it? I mean, if you're going to play your lovely reel, you know, it'll go, you know. But there are other times when it hasn't quite been the right thing to do, is it?
We just discussed this, listeners, before we pressed the record button. I remember being, I wouldn't say shouted at, but more admonished in a corner. Yeah, there was a passionate plea from David Yao when students were students were doing a pirouette exercise, and I followed them, and I was told in no uncertain terms not to change the tempo so that they could fit 4 pirouettes in. I was like, no, if they can't fit 4 in the time, then they should only do 3.
Well, there are ways that you can cheat. You can steal some time from somewhere else, but you know the music is the music and the tempo is the tempo, and you've just got to fit it in.
But when is it appropriate to do rubato? Because I don't know about you, Matt, I do it sometimes without even noticing.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Because I'm
for a musician, it's okay because that's your poetic license, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
I do it to help, or because I think I'm helping.
Right. The reason I'm so stern with this is because I learned a very stern lesson very early on when I was a dancer, and I was given one of my first big chances doing France in Coppelia, and I went back afterwards and I complained that the conductor was playing too fast, and my feet didn't touch the ground. I got hauled into the office straight away. And in no uncertain terms was told, if you can't adapt to the orchestra and everything, then we will just take it away from you. Right. That was the end of story.
Yeah.
And so from then on, I learnt how to adapt. And as an artist, you need to do that, both as a musician and as a dancer. You need to know how to adapt. And I think it's really important that people don't get, settled on their laurels, thinking, oh, I am the star and you should be playing for me. It doesn't work like that. It's a collaboration.
And we respect each other. I have seen that happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
it's not good.
I know.
Do you know, I think often I find myself doing it by accident, just pulling out the end of phrases and things like that. If you see take the obvious one for pliés, you've got 4 positions, let's say, and at the end of each position, I'll just pull out ever so slightly after 16 bars, and then especially if it's going to go on to the second side, you've always got an extra count of music before the dancer goes up into releve or whatever, and then spins around into the second side.
There's a difference between that and then really stretching for 7 pirouettes which distorts the music
totally.
And I guess there's a time and a place for that if it's a rehearsal or if that's what the orchestra will do or something. But something like that, what we do in pliés, that's us just feeling the music we're playing.
Yeah. Yes,
and that's the beauty of having live music.
Yes,
just slightly stretch for that soutenu to the second side. So that is useful, I suppose, isn't it?
It is.
That's when it is useful, rubato.
It's learning how to be artistic. Where to breathe, when to anticipate.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you.
I mean, that's funny what you say, stretching it out for 17 pirouettes. One of the biggest lessons that I was taught years ago, and I won't mention the company or the composer, but it was a new ballet, and it was rubbish. The score was written by a film composer, and it was adequate music. It was background music for whatever was going on. But the conductor was telling us, like, you have to, or the music director at the time, you have to respect the music, how it was written. Whether we think it's good or not, you've got to respect it.
Totally.
And things have changed over time. Obviously, if you look at the tempo of any of the big classics, your Swan Lakes, your Nutcrackers, your Sleeping Beauties, if you're lucky enough to be able to find footage from, 40, 50 years ago, everything was quicker, and obviously techniques advanced. But then it was more true to Tchaikovsky's original intentions as a composer, whereas now, rests are put in for the sake of somebody sticking in 6 or 8 pirouettes for virtuosic, tendencies, which I don't know.
It just loses the vibrancy of whatever you're doing, and that's the reason why I don't encourage it, because it makes people lazy.
And then you've got, tempi this leads onto slightly.
And the thing, just going back to Rubato, at the company, they sort of encourage it. If they're doing a tondo exercise and it finishes with the pirouettes, they want you to stretch out because they're just getting on their balance and, squeezing an extra turn in and then, back to the first tempo.
Every company's different.
Yeah.
And they have their own ways of working.
So if that's the intention as well behind the exercise, you've got a specific set of pirouettes that you want to fit in the end, then they're going to do 6 or 7 or 8 pirouettes and then finish and go to the second side, because that's the intention of the exercise. Yeah. Whereas just pulling it out for the sake of it, just for someone's whim, maybe.
I mean, it's an intentional thing that they do in the company because that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
But if you're training that in a school, you then train people who don't understand, the minute details of music, of how you can actually increase excitement by speeding something up or slowing something down. But if they're always expecting something to be slower, then they don't really understand what's going on. Why isn't it the way I usually have it? That's not what we're trying to train in a school.
Actually, you told me a really good lesson about that in the sort of semi-recent past when you were teaching some Cecchetti. And I said to you, I was like, isn't it worth playing the same music every time so that we know what it is? And you're like, well, yes, but they have to learn to be able to dance on different sets of music.
Exactly. Otherwise, they just stop listening.
And then you can become embroiled in music, can't you? And then you see it sometimes if you're in companies or with professional dancers, if you're doing open classes or whatever, you play one of the big male solos or female solos for an exercise, for a Pitti Allegro or a Grande Allegro. And sometimes people can get choreography confused because they hear a set of music and this is what my body instinctively wants to do.
So what happens in an open class? Do you use rubato a lot?
For professionals, more so. Yeah.
But not like as a beginner's class.
No. If it's someone that I know... But I always find the dancer that is musical or who is feeling the music that I'm playing and sort of just tune in with them a bit more, not really stretch the music, but just feel it playing-wise as they're feeling it, as they're dancing, and things like that.
You said that earlier, didn't you, Chris?
And actually, sometimes in an open class, that's one of the most fun things to do. It doesn't sometimes matter about the technical ability. That you could be a beginner's class, but if you see somebody who's really trying really hard with music and feels music and embodies it, then you've always got an eye on that person to watch.
Yeah. But I was thinking about how rubato can help technique, because let's say someone's going for an attitude pirouette and they just need it slightly eked out so they can squeeze on that landing. I think that is helpful. Would you agree or not?
As a professional, perhaps if you're in a performance and you're really on and you have a very accommodating conductor or somebody who's playing for you, then fine. But
in training, they've got to be rhythmical with it.
You have to know how fast you turn as an individual, and then you have to adapt yourself in terms of your preparation so that you actually match with the music. Otherwise, how are you going to develop your artistry if you don't know how fast or slow you turn?
Yeah.
You can follow the podcast team by visiting the social media channels. Search for Ballet Piano Podcast on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter for up-to-date information and content about the podcast.
I've got a Rubato story.
You knew where I was going with that. Horror stories about Rubato. Go on, you go first. You've got your throat so far in that microphone. Go for it, love.
Only because it's happened in this last season. One of the dancers at the company that I work at, I was going to stretch the music a little bit, and she was she had changed the way she phrased the exercise to account for her doing more pirouettes, but the music being in time. And because I slowed to accommodate her, it threw her. And I felt so bad. She was just preparing for an on-to-don pirouette, but she had sort of slightly changed the exercise or the timing of the exercise as she was doing it so she could fit more turns in. And because I changed the music.
Because of what you were seeing.
Because I was thinking, I'm going to be helpful. And I felt so bad. I almost went up to the end and apologised because it was very obvious.
But she didn't hear it coming.
No.
She didn't adapt to it.
No.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, that's a 6 of 1.5 a dozen, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that sort of comes in with a little bit like reading the room, which is something else we'll talk about in the future. I've been, told off for both ways, not just from David for slowing down, but then maybe at a slightly more advanced level. I was thinking, I've been told the previous day, this is the tempo, this is what we're going to do. This is what I want. I was like, okay, right, you don't follow, you just play. So, perfect, I can do that. Eyes down, look in. But the next day, being told, why aren't you accompanying the dancers? So, well, because yesterday you told me to do this. I was like, I haven't been instructed any differently. Oh, today I want you to do it differently. It's like, right, I'm not a mind reader. I was like, I will do it. I did for the rest of the class, and everybody fit in thousands of pirouettes. It was marvelous. I've never seen people spin so much. But yeah, that was slightly awkward for me. I didn't like that. It was on stage on tour. I was like,
No, I think you're right. I think it's a two-way street. If the musician is going to try and help the dancer by adapting, then as soon as the dancer or the artist hears a musical change, they've got to be on their best mettle and open their ears and listen, because otherwise you're going to miss it. And that's what increases your development as an artist, is that you actually can adapt as soon as you hear something new.
Yeah.
And if you think it's always going to be the same, then you're on a hiding to nowhere.
Especially if you're lucky enough to get a job in a professional company anywhere in the world that's got its own orchestra. And let's be honest, 3 or 4 conductors in-house and a plethora of other guest conductors coming in, it's never going to be the same.
And lots of different pianists that play in different styles.
Exactly.
Different.
We're looking for artists, aren't we? We are artists. That's what we want to develop, both as a musician and as an artist, as a dancer. And so just trying to bend over backwards just because somebody can do 20 pirouettes is not enough.
I really like that, though, that you don't allow that. But then how do you develop that understanding then, say, going forward? So is there a way that creeps in, or is it just maturity?
Maturity.
Yeah.
It's experience. And you just learn how to pinch time from other places if you're going to do 20 pirouettes. I'm not saying don't do 20 pirouettes. That's fantastic. If you can do that, and that's your thing. But if you can't do it on the music and end with the music, then you've lost the whole plot.
Yeah. Well, let's face it, it looks bobbins. Oh, sorry, for anybody who doesn't come from where I come from in Manchester, it looks rubbish, not bobbins. When people, I've just got back from Manchester, so, I've still got a bit of northern slang in me. It looks rubbish when anything doesn't finish together, be it a solo, a class exercise. It's all about finishing together, isn't it? You've got to.
Absolutely. If you're in an orchestra, you all have to finish together, don't you? It's the same thing. Yeah. It's a collaboration.
We've all seen those YouTube videos of when the soloist has decided to it always seems to be pirouettes actually for this pulling out of tempo, doesn't it? But when they've decided to stick in an extra 1 or 2 at the end of the big male solo and it hasn't worked well because it's not been communicated earlier, or they just decided to go for it, the conductor hasn't read it, and the orchestra finishes before, or vice versa, and it just looks rubbish.
It does. Yeah, I agree.
So we're going to develop more musical understanding between all of us, I think.
I think in general, we think at a school, avoid it. Or in training.
With the younger students, I'd say avoid it. As you go further up in terms of let's say your last years of the training, then you can introduce more and more. If it's like mutually agreed upon, the teacher wants it, they've talked to you about it, and everybody knows it's going to happen, then fine. But if it's expected without it being requested, then you've got to start thinking, okay, does this person who's dancing, do they really understand music at all?
Yeah.
I think on that note, I can't say anything else on that because that was the absolute gem for anybody who's listening to this, who is a graduating student from any school, anywhere, who wants to get a job and understand musicality, David.
Absolutely. If you're in an audition and you're off the music, that's it. Bye.
In those awful cattle market auditions as well. Actually, 300 in there, right? Get out, get out. Oh.
Yeah, totally.
Right. On that note, I'm going to bring it to a close because I have got nothing more to give to this, David. That was spectacular. You just bowled me over, as always, with your gems of just experience and information. So join us next time where we will be discussing something else. Check out the socials to see what that will be. And before you leave us, don't forget, we're going to be doing another Q&A session at some point in the very near future. So if you want to ask us anything about anything in our careers, possibly Akiko's personal life, let's see. Let us know. We're on the socials.
How big is the baby at the moment?
Massive. How sick is Akiko? Very. How big? Yeah. So let us know. We're on the email at balletpianopodcast@gmail.com, or if you head to our website at balletpianopodcast.com, you can check out all the social links from there. So for now, it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And bye-bye for me.